a community on the rise, filled with people looking to make a great life for themselves.
He was nice to everyone. He was very generous to his family, beloved by all.
When Eric loses contact with everyone in his life, his friends and family are quick to grow concerned.
He had not spoken to family in 2 days.
That was just highly unusual.
But for him, it's already too late. Silver Spring, Maryland, is a community located just north of Washington, D.C.
It was really up and coming. A lot of clubs, a lot of bars, a lot of brand new high-rise houses and apartment buildings, condominiums. It's a much younger crowd, a much more urban crowd, lots of metro access, lots of jobs available, very close to D.C. So it's a very sought-after area.
It's a very diverse community. It's kind of an urban area, even though we are a suburban community. It is literally only maybe a block and a half outside of the District of Columbia. It was a very trendy area.
Éric Samoa was charismatic. That was the number one word that a lot of people use to describe Eric. He worked at a luxury dealership in Bethesda, and he was a smooth talker. He was funny. He was the person everybody wanted to be around. He was the number one salesman at their dealership. He was the first one in. He was always the last one to leave. Everybody loved him.
Éric Samoa was 34 years old. He was beloved by friends and coworkers. Eric made somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 a month. He was a ladies' man. He was nice to everyone. He was very generous to his family, beloved by all. He was the kind of guy that kept contact with just about everybody that was part of his life, family and friends. He was very attentive to his customers, which led to his success in business. And, he was a very popular guy.
Eric is living it up. He has great relationships, an incredible job, and lives in style.
Apartment complex was one with a brand new facility surrounded by $750,000 condominiums to $1 million condominiums. Lots of shopping and dining you could walk to in this particular area. The building itself was very fancy. It had an indoor pool and workout facilities.
In spring of 2012, everyone in Eric's life suddenly loses all contact with him.
So at that point, on June 6th of 2012, Eric had not shown up for work, and that was, of course, unusual for Eric. His manager was concerned. He had not spoken to family in 2 days. Eric was always very involved with his family. He talked with his sister, his friends a lot, and that was concerning to them that there was 2 days where basically he was unavailable.
And this is somebody who lived with his cell phone. It was absolutely essential to all of his personal relationships and the way he conducted his business. That's how he reached out to his customers. His phone went dead. That was just highly unusual. The work people were so concerned, they contacted his family and talked to his mom and his sister. And one of his sisters ultimately called Montgomery County Police and requested that the police do what we call a welfare check. Can you please go to the apartment, check to see if he's okay? They got together with the landlord who gave him the key.
Calling the police is usually thought of as something strictly for worst-case emergencies, but sometimes we're needed just to come into a situation and make sure everything's okay. A welfare check is something that can be critical when a person lives alone and suddenly loses contact.
When they went to the apartment, the first thing police noticed was a really awful smell. And Eric's apartment, though very luxurious in a high-rise, was small. So when they came in the front, you kind of immediately see this bedroom to the side. And that's where Eric's body was found, in bed, virtually looking undisturbed. All the lights off, the blinds shuttered. And Eric was actually hands tucked under his chin, his sheet tucked under between his hands, just as if he was peacefully sleeping. But obviously the police noticed that there was a bullet hole in his head. Initially, police thought that it was a suicide.
While police are conducting their welfare check in Eric's apartment, his family is down in the lobby waiting on news. By the time they are told what is happening, the investigation is leaning toward the theory that Eric has committed suicide.
That was the initial information that was relayed to his family. They were absolutely horrified by the suggestion that that was what would happen. They said he would never do that.
The initial theory that Eric must have committed suicide doesn't last very long after the scene of the crime is more thoroughly investigated.
That was backtracked on very quickly because the officers obviously conspicuously saw that there was no gun.
This was not a suicide. It was a homicide.
There was one shell casing found on the bed. It was a spent shell casing from a .380. No gun was located.
The medical examiner conducts an autopsy to confirm cause of death and look for any other possible forensic evidence which could help steer the investigation.
The mechanism for death in this case was a gunshot wound. The gunshot wound was to the high part of the front of his head, the temple. It appeared to be an execution, essentially, to us and to the police. And there was also a bullet that was recovered at the time of the autopsy inside of Eric's body.
There is very limited evidence at the crime scene, leaving ballistic evidence as the only lead to follow.
There appears to have been nothing stolen, nothing ransacked, so it also appeared that whoever got into his apartment was someone that he let in there. They didn't break in, and they apparently didn't come to steal anything because they didn't take anything.
With no apparent sign of theft or disruption to the apartment, we're left to believe that whoever is responsible is likely someone Eric knows. Someone he's close enough with that they either have their own key or he's comfortable with them spending the night.
With little else to go on, the police are left with only a .380 bullet shell to bring Eric's killer to justice. But will it be enough? Silver Spring, Maryland, is an up-and-coming community just north of Washington, D.C. Great for young professionals to build their lives. 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 is a successful car salesman known for keeping in touch with everyone close to him and never having his phone too far from reach.
When Eric hasn't been heard from for 2 days straight, his family calls the police to do a welfare check, leading to the discovery that he has been murdered.
Later on in the investigation, it was very quickly realized that Eric's phone was missing. That was the only thing that was missing from the apartment, and there were valuables all around, his wallet, a watch. The only thing missing was the phone.
Eric's missing phone is considered especially curious because he's known for keeping in touch with everyone close to him. His lack of communication is exactly what tipped off his family and led them to have the police check on him. Why wouldn't his phone be in his apartment? Has whoever killed him taken it?
So at that point, the police, I think their first line of attack was Eric's life through that cell phone. They didn't have the phone. They were able to very quickly get cell phone records. And they were able to see when Eric was texting messages, where the phone was. They were looking for the phone's location. The phone was ultimately never found. And throughout those records, they were able to identify the people that Eric was in contact with on the last days of his death. Most of them were friends and family. Most of them were people that had reached out to the police that were concerned about the investigation and asking questions. The police, though, did quickly realize that there was one number that kind of kept coming up over and over again. It was a Mississippi number. And his family didn't know that he knew anyone from Mississippi.
The police focus on trying to identify the owner of this Mississippi number from Eric's cell phone records.
The police didn't know who this person was, so one of the detectives in the case decided to really just canvass the garage of the apartment complex to see if they could find a car from Mississippi. A lot of young people live in the area. We're close to D.C. A lot of people who only are in the D.C. area for a short period of time do live in Silver Spring. So the police thought, hey, maybe there was somebody from out of state that was here, and they were able to locate that car.
Tracing the license plate number reveals the name Katrina Ben, a woman who has recently moved into the building. With this information, the police are able to track her down and bring her in for an interview to ask her about her relationship with Eric.
So Katrina Ben was from Silver Creek, Mississippi. She was a very young, very attractive, very smart nurse. And by all accounts of people who knew her and previous employers, she was really good at what she did. Her patients really liked her. She ended up becoming a traveling nurse because she wanted to sort of see the country and see the world. And she was with a company that would staff her to 3-month sort of stints all around the country. So she moved very, very frequently, and she did get to do what she wanted. She got to see a lot of the country through her job.
She also was a very attractive young woman. Her families did have some concern, as you might imagine, a young, attractive young woman who sort of a nomadic, moving around every 3 months from place to place. They had some concerns about that, but she loved it, and that's what she did. And she was apparently beloved by the patients that she cared for and had lots of close friends.
So Katrina and Eric actually met at the Viridian apartment. There was a community lounge on the 15th floor that was available to residents for parties and community functions. And during that time of the year was the NBA playoffs. And the apartment was organizing sort of playoff watch parties for the residents to go. She was wearing scrubs. He recognized her as a nurse. Eric was very entrepreneurial. He was always looking to kind of set up new companies, start a side hustle. And one of the things he was looking to do was start up a nursing staffing company. And she was also interested in that as well. So when he saw that she was in the healthcare field, they exchanged information related to potentially establishing a business relationship, but they also became quick friends as they were in this social group that was watching the NBA tournament.
That began a friendship that very, very quickly escalated into a sexual relationship between the two of them. During the 3 or 4 weeks, there were extensive text messaging that went back and forth between Eric and Katrina. And that text messaging began 3 or 4 weeks before, pretty benignly. Nice to meet you. Hey, handsome, how you doing? How's your day going? Very benign things. It became very easy to see the rapid escalation in the nature of the relationship simply by reading the text messages. And it rapidly became sexual, and they openly talked about it in their exchanges on the text messages. And coming up to the night of the murder, if you read the text messages, you realized that she was supposed to come over to his apartment that night to watch, they were both mutual NBA fans. They were supposed to come over to watch a game in the apartment that evening.
I'm a basketball fan, and so is he. So that was our connection. The game was coming on that night, and he was like, we can watch it.
On Monday, June 4th of 2012, Eric Samoa and Katrina Ben made plans to watch an NBA playoff game. And Katrina was supposed to come to Eric's apartment to watch that game. Eric and her hung out that evening, but she herself would say that Eric just was not attentive to her. He was making phone calls, he was paying bills, he was online checking his email, and he even took her at some point to go to a drug dealer's to buy some marijuana.
Sometime in the second quarter, he said, I did something real stupid a couple of days ago. And I was like, what? He said, I smoked some weed. I was like, okay, whatever floats your boat. You know, I know people that smoke weed. I've never had any in my life. Feel free to take a blood sample, hair sample, whatever you need to do. I've never had any. I don't like to be around it, you know. And I kind of said something to that effect to him. I was kind of joking, but I was like, I work for the government. I ain't got time to be going down for no weed, you know. He was like, girl, please, I know somebody in the building, I kind of want some. A few minutes later, he called someone, and he asked them 2 or 3 times, where are you at? Where are you at? Where are you at? And then he just hung up. I don't know if they hung up on him. I don't know.
As Katrina continues recounting the events of the night, this unknown person crops up again.
Beginning of the 3rd quarter, I know this sounds so stupid, but for real, I just relate stuff to what quarter it was.
Too, so
I don't know what time it was.
That would have been probably, the games usually last about 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking probably a little after 10.
Yeah,
10 and 10:30
it was.
then.
So whoever this was, he was speaking code, but I'm not stupid.
Right.
I know what 420 is.
What was the code?
420 is what I picked up on, but it was other I don't know what the hell he was saying. I'm not that cool. I don't know.
There absolutely was a contact between this marijuana dealer and Eric the night that he died. She went with him to the marijuana dealer's house, and they did buy drugs.
And she was able to give the police sort of very specific directions about the path they took to get to this drug dealer's house. Very detailed description of what he looks like, and she's able to describe the conversation between Eric and this drug dealer in great detail.
Eric and Katrina go back to his apartment after their drive. They watch the rest of the basketball game and eventually go to bed.
She is awoken in the night to hearing 2 men talking, and she recognizes that one of them is Eric, and she believes the other one of the men in the apartment is this drug dealer that she saw earlier. And she says she's sort of looking through a crack in the door, hearing this conversation.
When I woke up to him talking to somebody, and it was a guy, and he opened the bedroom door, he came in, and as he opened the door, I could see who I think is the guy from the apartment, walk by to go to the couch. So that's who he was talking to.
When Eric comes into the room to see Katrina, he has been smoking marijuana. She doesn't want to risk smelling like it herself and tells him she doesn't want to be near him.
And she kind of says she feels uncomfortable. She doesn't really know what's going on. She doesn't want to be there. So she decides to go through the closet exit for the bedroom out to the front door.
Can y'all just please tell me what happened?
Well, like I said, I think I told you that he was murdered. We still trying to put the timeline together, but obviously we thought you were one of the last people to have been with him. But now, you're telling us that when you left, this guy's with him.
Katrina's account of the night gives the police their first major suspect. But who is this supposed drug dealer? And can they find him before he kills again? 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 is found murdered in his own bed, shot in the head with a .380. Police are able to get his phone records, revealing that he's been in close contact with Katrina Ben on the night of his murder. Katrina is brought in for questioning and explains that she isn't the last one to see Eric alive. She tells them that when she leaves his apartment, a drug dealer is there.
There were text messages that led them to a phone number, which led them to a cell phone location and then an associated address. They ended up going to that associated address, and this drug dealer was arrested on unrelated drug charges.
We did a search warrant. The purported drug dealer owned a .380. Now, as you can imagine, based on the information coming from Katrina, that he was there when she left, knowing that he was shot with what appeared to be a .380, they thought, well, here it is. This is the murder weapon.
At this point, it looks like an open and shut case. The victim was killed by a .380. A witness places this man at the scene of the crime. This man even owns a .380.
He was interviewed. He absolutely adamantly denied being involved in the murder, and he flat out said, I've never been to his apartment, check my phone. And the police did. And never once could they put him through his phone at Eric's apartment.
The investigation into this man does not stop with phone records. The police continue to look into him, but as evidence continues to build, they are forced to concede that he could not have been involved.
And what we did, in fact, was through cell phone records, we found out where the drug dealer was at the time of the killing. We looked at the photo records and realized he never came into the building. We interviewed him and found out that, look, I don't even know where my customers live. I go to their houses. They come to me. Using the cartridge case, they were able to exclude the .380 as the gun that had fired the bullet that killed Eric. And so the .380, even though he owned a .380, it was not the murder weapon. It was excluded as the murder weapon.
While the police rule out their prime suspect, Eric's funeral is held, and Katrina says her final goodbye with the rest of Eric's friends and family.
Katrina Ben attended Eric Samoa's funeral, and she sat front and center, and she grieved, and she was dressed to the nines, and I remember it was a black dress and heels. She mingled with the family, and she sent her condolences. When the investigation ran cold, the police did ultimately sort of turn back to Katrina. There were a lot of seasoned detectives on this case, and there were just a lot of little things that didn't add up. Some of her reactions were strange. Some of her reactions were inconsistent.
She became the focus in the investigation, mainly because of the text messages. Showed their relationship and showed that there was some tension in the relationship about him not really giving her the kind of attention she wanted. And even on the night of the murder, attempting to break the date before they actually did come to be together, ostensibly to watch some portion of an NBA basketball game.
On June 29, 2012, Katrina is approached at her building by police wearing a hidden recording device.
So at some point, the detectives decided to wear a recorder to go to her apartment to execute a search warrant. Unbeknownst to Katrina, that entire encounter was recorded, and police officers were talking to her throughout that search.
I shouldn't have to deal with this. I'm tired of it. This is what happened. 2.5 months of my life, and this is what I have to deal with. You know, Eric was a cool person, great con for Eric,
but also understand, he's dead.
To me,
He's dead.
Worth all this. He was not.
Obviously, I don't think that you killed him. But the only way I could tell my boss to kind of like leave you the hell alone is to say, we checked the computer, we checked the phone. She doesn't have do you own a gun? Have you ever fired a gun?
No.
Do you have a gun?
Probably should have one.
Do you have a gun in your apartment? Anywhere here?
During that meeting, I think the officers' suspicions were heightened because at that point, she said, I wish this guy had killed me. And officers kind of were perplexed by that. And she said, it probably would be a lot more peaceful for me right now if he had just killed me instead of Eric. And the police were really baffled by that comment because it was just very cold. It was very calculating, and it was very different from the grieving kind of girlfriend that she wanted to portray at the beginning of the investigation.
Regardless of suspicions leaning toward Katrina, there is only evidence that she's with Eric that night and nothing to connect her to the actual murder. Because of this, the police instead put their focus on finding the murder weapon.
It might be a bit of a long shot, but at this point, the lead detective on the case begins looking at lost property, which might have been turned in since the date of the murder, with the hope that maybe a gun had been turned in.
So what actually happened was, at that time in 2012, any lost property that was found by the police, it simply was categorized as like one code, missing property. Didn't matter if it was a gun, didn't matter if it was a cell phone, didn't matter if it was a bicycle. So all that missing property just went into one code. So what Detective Rubin did was he pulled every single piece of missing property in those days after Eric Samoa's murder, and there ended up being, I think, like 58 reports. And the second to last report was a discarded .380 Lorson that was found on the side of 495, not terribly far from Eric's apartment.
When Eric Samoa is murdered in his own bed, the only evidence as to who could be responsible are the ballistics found at the scene and the fact that his cell phone has gone missing. Cell phone records reveal that Katrina Ben is most likely the last person to see Eric alive. But there's nothing to connect her to the actual act. But the discovery of the .380 automatic Colt pistol could be a key to breaking the whole case.
The missing property report has an account of where and when the gun was found.
If anybody's ever been to Washington, D.C., you'll know that surrounding Washington is something we call the Beltway. It's an interstate highway. It's 4 to 8 lanes wide. In the early morning hours of June 5th, a paramedic who was driving to work on the Beltway, he was in almost dead stop traffic on the Beltway. He was in the far left lane. Paramedics looks out his window and he sees laying on the ground a handgun. He's dead stopped in the roadway. He thinks it's bizarre, but he gets out of his car, picks up the handgun, looks at it, and what he does, which is phenomenal, he immediately goes directly to the police station that's nearest to where he is, but also this location is only a couple of minutes away from Eric's apartment and the apartment building where Katrina lives.
A gun of the right caliber found so close to Eric's building the morning after he's killed is too much of a coincidence to be ignored. But it's not enough. The investigators still need to find the gun's owner.
After the .380 was found on the side of the highway, the officers really did have their work cut out for them, because there is no national gun registration where you can simply take a firearm serial number and track every owner previously of that gun. The only ability for the detectives to do it is to do it by hand from owner to owner.
Turns out that that gun was originally sold in a town in Mississippi. Katrina Ben is from Mississippi. It was initially sold in a gun shop only a few miles away from her house. An interesting coincidence.
Each physical location, they had to access the physical piece of paper related to the gun, and they had to keep doing those steps, which included Mississippi, West Virginia. They had to go to several different places.
The detective goes down to Mississippi itself, and he begins to trace from gun shop to pawn shop to pawn shop how that gun changed hands, like 7 or 8 times. That gun was owned by various people.
I won't forget when Detective Rubin called me and he said, "We finally got that last trace back. It's Katrina Ben's gun." After the gun was traced to Katrina, the detectives immediately got the arrest warrant for her and went down to Silver Creek, Mississippi, and arrested her at her parents' home, and then interrogated her in Mississippi for the murder. And that, quite frankly, was one of the most bizarre interrogations that I have ever seen.
You still think you didn't kill her?
No.
Okay. Do you own a firearm?
Yeah.
Okay, what kind of firearm do you own?
The .380.
Okay, why didn't you tell us that last time?
Because you never asked. I didn't kill anyone, so it's no need for me to say I have a gun. I mean, you never asked. You asked me, have you ever held a gun? Mm-hmm. Have you ever fired a gun?
Mm-hmm. And Detective Rubin said, "No, that's not true." And she said, "No, you asked me if I held a gun. And you asked me if I have ever fired a gun. And my answer to both of those were no. You never asked me if I owned a gun." And Detective Rubin's response was, I promise you we did.
Unfortunately for Katrina, the first time she is asked about owning a gun is recorded.
Do you own a gun? Have you ever fired a gun?
No.
Do you have
probably should have one.
What was so bizarre about that interrogation was, first of all, it was so long.
I mean,
She loves to talk about herself. And Katrina Ben will always think that she is the smartest person in the room. And she was going to admit to nothing. But she told her life story. The most interesting part of the story she told was why, when she finally admitted that she owned a gun. And it was because she had 11 stalkers throughout her life.
Think of me as just a regular person. Listen, I'm not a detective.
But
I'm
wait a
listening to
minute,
the
you
story.
told me I said I didn't remember buying it. I just told you I bought it in 03, 04.
No, I said you remember buying it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm just a regular person listening to the story, right?
Right.
If I don't have an explanation right now, and it happened before on cases with me, I'll walk away thinking you're basically a cold-blooded killer. I've been in homicide 4.5 years. You're one of the best people I had to deal with, not just like smart-wise, but just, you're very polite. You tell a good story. I tell a good story.
Katrina refuses to admit to the crime at all. But by this point, there's enough evidence that a case is built around the perceived events of the night of the murder.
This was not a loving relationship. The investigation seems to reveal she did not know that. I think she felt her status was significantly more profound with him than it actually in fact was. And apparently there was at least one occasion where she saw him out with another woman. So this was beginning to build. And, if you read the text messages on the night that Eric died, you can see a lot of frustration because even on the night he died, he tried to break the date, but she wouldn't stand for him breaking the date.
What we were then later able to discover through the investigation was before Katrina came down to Eric's apartment. Through her key fob, her movement was recorded that night. She left her apartment. She went to her car. She came back into the apartment building and then down to Eric's apartment. And that's where we believe that she retrieved the gun. Katrina Ben, again, in her own statement, says that she then woke up at about 5 in the morning and she wanted to see what time it was. So she looked at his phone. The phone that was never recovered. And we believe at that point that she accessed the phone and was able to see that Eric was out with several different women, sometimes more than one woman on the same night of the week. And that was Katrina, with her earlier statement, nobody plays me that way.
I will tell you, the nature of the relationship she envisioned is not the nature of the relationship he envisioned. The reality is that Eric had a long-standing relationship with another woman who'd been dating for about a year. The next morning, she went to her car, not dressed for work, left her apartment, went someplace, came back a half hour later, walked back into her apartment, nothing in her hand. She later on claimed that she got gas, checked her credit. She bought gas by credit card. She didn't buy any gas. But if you drove from her apartment, drove down the block and got on the Beltway, because the entrance to the Beltway, where the gun is found, is down the end of her street, and then just sort of looped around and came back to the apartment, it would take you almost precisely and exactly 1/2 hour. She left her apartment with the handgun, went down the street, threw it out on the Beltway, came back to her apartment, armed with the information that she was no longer in possession of the murder weapon.
Katrina could tell you everything. She could tell you where she placed a wine glass. She could tell you the exact route they took to the drug dealer's house. But she couldn't remember when she last saw her gun, where she last had it, or where she put it. And for a woman who was so cunning about all these details and so exacting about all these details, it was very easy for the jury not to buy that part of her story.
Oh, you can think what you want to think, and you can stop talking to me right now.
It's not about it. It's about science and common sense.
Yeah, you can keep talking. Go ahead.
You want a lawyer? Is that what you're saying to us?
That's fine.
We'll walk away.
Yeah, bye.
We'll walk away.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks for the visit. Nice seeing you.
At this point, the evidence is sufficient that even without a confession, there's more than enough evidence to place Katrina Ben under arrest.
She was arrested on June the 21st, 2013, slightly a little bit more than a year after the killing.
Eric Samoa is found dead in his apartment on June 6, 2012, believed to be killed 2 days earlier. After a year-long investigation, with little more than ballistic forensics to lean on, Katrina Ben is arrested on June 21st, 2013.
Our case for Katrina Ben was a very circumstantial case, but we felt that it was a strong circumstantial case, which is why we were comfortable bringing the case. And in Maryland, the law makes no distinction about the weight that you can give to direct evidence versus circumstantial evidence. And the biggest piece of circumstantial evidence we had in our case was the gun. Once that gun was found, Katrina was charged. And then once she was charged, based on the legwork regarding that gun, we were comfortable prosecuting her.
Even without confirmation that Katrina's gun must have been used to kill Eric, the evidence that it could have been used is too much to ignore.
We did recover a bullet from Eric's body, as I mentioned earlier. The bullet became deformed upon entering his body. It was mangled. It was not suitable for comparison purposes uniquely to her handgun because of the deformities that were present in the bullet that was recovered.
There were a lot of coincidences that the jury was going to have to believe that that gun was not the murder weapon. Because Katrina Ben was the last person to see Eric Samoa alive. We could prove that. We could prove it was her gun. So you would have to believe that someone else used Katrina Ben's gun to kill someone she knew. And they did that within hours of her leaving Eric Samoa's apartment. And then they took her gun and threw it on the side of the highway sometime between the day Eric was killed and 2 days later when it was discovered. That area of the highway is only about a 20-minute drive from the apartment. And Katrina did what we called trip to nowhere. She left her apartment. She left without her cell phone. She was gone for exactly 1/2 an hour. She returned to the apartment. She picked up her cell phone and then she went to work and she was able to make it to work on time. In Maryland, motive is not an element of the offense, but the jury can consider a motive or lack of motive as a reason to convict or acquit. And juries, they want motives, quite frankly. And that was a very hard part of the case for us. But when you looked at the text messages and you looked at the time frames and you looked at how that relationship between Eric and Katrina soured, the motive was sort of the oldest motivation in the book, right? Jealousy and a scorned lover. That is ultimately the motive that we put forth to the jury. In Maryland, it's always the defendant's right to speak last. She spoke at her case and she turned directly to Eric's family and spoke and denied it all and said she loved him. And that was like a spectacle. The family lost their minds. They ran out of the courtroom. We waited till she was done speaking and then Detective Rubin kind of ushered everybody back in. The final verdict in the case was that Katrina was guilty on all counts. The jury convicted her of first-degree premeditated murder, and they convicted her of use of a firearm during the commission of a felony or violent crime.
She got the most profound punishment you can get under the law in my state, life without possibility of parole.
What we said to the judge at sentencing, and I think what is still true today, is this was not a crime of necessity. This was a cold and calculated murder simply because of a slight that this woman felt. Eric didn't take her out. He didn't show her off. He didn't take her to nice dinners, and he didn't call her when she wanted to be called. And that is the sorriest reason ever to take someone's life. Katrina is not someone that can be rehabilitated because there was no necessity for her crime. She killed simply because she felt slighted. And in that case, there's no telling what she would kill over again.
Eric was a good guy. He was a fun guy. He was considerate. He was, by most people's standards, pretty wealthy guy. He was generous. I think he was generous to his friends. He was generous to his family. Obviously, this was catastrophic to them. Eric's family, this was an immigrant family. Eric's mom and dad immigrated to the United States. So this was an American success story. Eric was an immigrant family success story that any family could be proud of, and this family was enormously proud of Eric.
Eric's family was very appreciative for the work that the state's attorney's office and the police department put into solving Eric's case. It was not an easy road, and it was not a straight line, and the case was cold for a while, but the family was very satisfied, I do believe, with the verdict in the case. It is truly a case where everybody that was assigned to that case, I do believe, was in the exact right place at the exact right time to hold her accountable. It really was a team effort between the prosecution, between the police department, the forensics teams. She was so smart. She was so calculating. And there are just so many things that could have happened in a different way that would have left her out of the picture. If Detective Rubin had never thought to look for that Mississippi license plate, the very next day she would have moved to Baltimore and potentially no one would have found her. If Brad Shoemaker hadn't looked over on the side of the road and turned that gun in, it might have been destroyed forever. There were just so many little pieces on that case that had to come together to get justice for Eric.
I think the families of these people, look, if you have a dead son, brother, loved one, they're still dead. I think justice is served to the extent that the person who did this was a cold, calculating execution. I think it was a magnificent police investigation, and we had the benefit of a good Samaritan giving us that gun. So justice is served in the sense that the person who did this killing is in jail for killing him. Still doesn't take away the pain from the family.
There is an instant attraction between the tall, likable Trenton and the young, pregnant Amber.
They went to dinner and they never spent a night apart after that.
When secrets start to pile up, things can turn deadly. Especially when someone is about to lose everything and has easy access to a gun.
The definition of a sociopath is someone who lacks a conscience or the ability to empathize with others.
A murder that shakes the very foundations of small-town America and leaves everyone asking why. When people think of Michigan, Detroit, Motor City, and the birthplace of Motown are two things that might come to mind. Very few instantly think of northern Michigan, with its wild and untamed beauty, covered in forest and locked between three of the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, and Huron.
Levering is a small rural community in Emmett County.
If you blink, you'll pass it on the way to the Mackinac Bridge to get to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Very desolate, in the middle of nowhere.
Trenton Mallory is born and raised in Levering. He's known as Trading Trent because he's always doing internet deals and trading up for something better. He likes to buy and resell guns on different marketplace sites.
When I first met Trenton, I thought he was this big, goofy, 6.5 foot tall man. He was just amazing. I knew he was a person that I wanted to be friends with. His personality just reached out and grabbed you. I worked for a big box store, and he used to come in, and he was a distributor.
Amber grows up in Charlotte, Michigan, about 3 hours south of Levering.
When Amber was little, she always had the need to make people laugh, and she just found a way to do it so naturally. She was hysterical.
Amber was sweet as pie. She really was. She always smiled. She's a beautiful person inside and out.
Because of her excellent grades, Amber receives a scholarship to go to college. She doesn't stay happy there for long, coming home at Thanksgiving, already deciding never to go back. Disappointed and exasperated with Amber's behavior, Darlene feels once again it is another argument that ends with Amber getting her own way.
Amber got into the party life, and Amber got into having fun. While they expected her to get good grades, she had a scholarship. She just didn't want to do it. She was with a boyfriend she had met, and she got pregnant. It just didn't work out, and there she was, home, pregnant, by herself.
With her boyfriend no longer in the picture, pregnant and living in her mom's basement, Darlene is unsure of Amber's future. But she has an idea. Amber and Trenton should meet.
They had so many common interests. I mean, they both liked the same sports teams. They were both into the outdoors, real people-oriented. They went to dinner, and they never spent a night apart after that.
They move in together immediately.
They kind of reminded you of a little old married couple. They just bicker, and then it was just a big joke. And their relationship was so full of love and energy. When I saw them together, it just made my heart beam, because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Trouble soon strikes the happy couple. At 3 months old, their son is rushed by a helicopter downstate to the Children's Hospital with an enlarged heart. He is diagnosed with cardiomyopathy.
And it was so severe, he had to be on a transplant list, and he had a Berlin heart. It was actually a heart on the outside of his body that pumped the blood through him.
The medical care for this child was putting them in a financial ruin.
Medications upward of $5,000 a week are vital to their son staying alive and not covered by insurance. To make matters even worse, their son develops leukemia generated by the cardiomyopathy and medication. 4 weeks before her son is to get his heart transplant, Amber and Trenton find out she is pregnant.
The heart transplant took a real toll on them. I mean, they were both exhausted. At one point, Amber just was like, I can't deal with a relationship and this. And Trenton was like, no, we're a family. You don't walk away from family. We will work on this.
Amber needs a break from the stress of the overwhelming medical bills and looking after her constantly sick child. She decides to head to the casino one night and blow off some steam. To her surprise, she wins $1,200.
Date night was the casino. Amber got Trenton going, and then they both just really liked it. They would go to the casino at least once a week.
Things finally seem on the upswing for the devoted couple. The oldest boy has had his heart transplant, is in remission from his leukemia, and their youngest son is born healthy.
It just made my heart beam, because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Amber didn't just, slide over the bar. She wanted to be the best. She wanted to be the best mom at school. She wanted to be the best partner to her husband. She wanted to be the best, everything.
The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear at minus 21 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Her first stop is to buy snacks for school at the local store.
Amber had left the residence that morning to take her kids to school. She left about 7:05 a.m. When she left, Trent was sleeping in bed. Normally they took the bus. This morning she decided to drive him to school. She went to a small store in Pellston where she purchased a snack for her son to take to class that day.
Next stop is to take her younger son, who has been sick for a few days, to the local clinic.
And while she's sitting there waiting for her son to be evaluated by the doctor, she texts Trent at about 9:13 a.m. with no response from him. After they leave Quick Care, they go to pick up a prescription for the son.
Amber makes her last purchase at 9:46 a.m. before heading off to her sister Amy's house for a quick visit. Amy lives with her partner Mike, about 20 minutes away from Evering, but no one is at their place, so they head home, arriving at around 10:30. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home. The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home.
The initial call was March 6, 2014 from Amber Smith. She indicated that when she returned home that morning, the door was ajar to the residence.
And she walks inside and she sees the house in disarray. It wasn't like how she left it. There's pill bottles all over the place. The drawers are pulled out. So she just gets inside the house and sees this.
She stated that she did not see Trent, backed out and went to the car and called 911. The Emmett County Sheriff's Department deputy responded to the scene, made contact with her.
Okay, so the inside door is open.
Which I just thought was weird, but I mean, Trent is the most forgetful person that I know, so I was like, hey, he just forgot to shut the door, maybe he didn't get up.
And I'm sorry, so are you outside when you call 911?
I told Carson to get his boots back on to get back outside, which he did, and I told him to get in his car seat just because I knew he was safe inside the car. I dialed 911 and then I sat in the car with him.
There was some medications that were in the kitchen cupboard that were thrown down onto the counter as though somebody was going through the medications. There was a small Century beige style safe that was open, laying on the floor. The contents of the medicine cabinet and the cabinet where the sink was at had been thrown askew onto the floor. They had a number of guns. Upon entering the bedroom, the deputy could see that there was a subject laying in bed. He had the covers, blankets up to his neck. There was obviously visible sign of trauma to the subject's head, and he was deceased in bed.
There's no doubt in the deputy's mind that he has found Trenton Mallory. A detective soon arrives on the scene and starts speaking to Amber, hoping to get a clearer picture as to what has happened. As hard as it is to question someone minutes after they've learned their loved one has been murdered, it's imperative to find out as much as possible and as quickly as possible about the victim.
There is absolutely nothing easy to say, to do, to make you feel any better in the situation, so I'm terribly sorry for that.
It's not your fault. But you can help, right? You can figure it out.
That's what I'm here for. I'm going to figure this out. I got to ask you a lot of questions, so as you may know, or may not, time is of the essence in this situation, I guess, okay?
The reporting person always needs to be cleared. Spouse, a fiance, a girlfriend, anybody that's close to the deceased. You're going to want to clear them with an alibi or at least verify their story the best you can and get a better picture of what's going on.
At the beginning, the world is wide open as far as potential suspects goes. Trenton is Mr. Nice Guy. He is a hard-working family man. There is nobody that can be found who would say anything negative about Trent or who can give a reason as to why someone would want to kill him.
Who doesn't like Trenton? Who would be his biggest enemies?
Everybody likes Trent. He's such a good guy. Everybody likes him.
Enemies?
I don't think so.
Trenton's the most amazing man ever. I couldn't love him more if I had given birth to him. Trenton was so special and so kind. He would do anything for anybody.
If this, in fact, is a homicide, if it is, I would assume that you would cooperate to the fullest. And that means taking computers, phones, anything.
That's fine, I don't care.
With the cooperation of a grief-stricken Amber secured, police start tracking movements, calls, and texts between her and Trenton and others involved in their lives.
Inside of the bedroom where Trent was located deceased, there was a gun cabinet. In there was approximately 5 long guns. Underneath the bed in a case was another long gun. And then there was another long gun that was propped up against the closet door in the bedroom, along with ammunition and other hunting supplies.
Trenton's body is removed by the medical examiner. The autopsy shows that Trenton has died from a single gunshot wound to the left side of his head, an inch or two behind his ear.
The projectile used to shoot Trent was a .22 Super X long rifle bullet. The spent projectile removed from Trent's head at that time by the autopsy appeared to be .22 caliber, which would be consistent with the empty casing found next to the bed. Medical examiner placed the time of death on March 6, 2014 at 9 a.m. And based on the alibi that was presented by Amber Smith at that time, she was not at home at 9 a.m. as the time of death that was indicated on Trent's death certificate.
Police officers came and knocked on my door and asked me if I knew Trent Mallory, and I said yes, and they told me that he had passed away. And I was like, where did the accident happen? And they're like, he was murdered.
Amber Smith comes home to discover their house has been broken into and ransacked. Even more horrible, her fiancé Trenton is found murdered in the master bedroom, lying face down on the bed with severe head trauma.
I have to tell you that we are treating this as a homicide. Okay?
It was very plausible that this was a break-in, and Trent just did not wake up, and somebody actually shot him while attempting to steal stuff from his house.
At this point, what's going to happen at this point is basically a bunch of investigators are going to be at your house for a period of time, okay? All right? Now, when you pulled up to the driveway, you saw the inside door was open. The screen was shut, but it's always a little ajar. When you walked into the house, did you yell for Trenton at all?
No, because I didn't know if he was still sleeping or not, so.
Okay.
The world was wide open as far as to potential suspects and who would want to kill Trent, who would want to break into their house, who would know that Amber and the kids had left at the time they did. So it was a matter of digging into Trent's life and to Amber's life and to the family's life just to see, is there something that we don't know about? Is there's something going on?
detectives begin coming up with various scenarios and suspects, and slowly start to eliminate those with an alibi.
How did the person get in the house? Was there forced entry? Did they break into the house? I mean, how did they gain entry to the house to commit this crime?
They're way out in the middle of nowhere.
There's so many people that he's always dealing with from work, and people swing by, and he tells me who they are, but if you understood Trent, there are so many people that he knows and that know him, and, you know, they'll stop by or will swing by someone else's house. So.
Trenton was buying items like from sporting goods stores, trail cams, and, you know, different kind of weaponry, you know, hunting rifles and hunting gear. And he was buying them and then selling them on Facebook Marketplace.
They kind of started looking at that aspect of Trading Trent was his nickname, that maybe he just got in with the wrong person.
So we're basically in the middle of nowhere, right? Basically in the middle of nowhere. And why, if I were to tell you that it's a possibility, okay, that somebody caused the death here, that somebody caused the death to Trenton, who do you think would do such a thing?
Nobody would do that. Trent buys and trades a lot of stuff, so there's always people coming and going, buying stuff or selling stuff.
People involved in the trading and bartering world are not always what or who they seem to be. Many people post items for sale with descriptions that are not always accurate. The old saying, buyer beware, still rings true, especially when buying, selling, and trading guns and ammunition. Occasionally, stories of deals gone wrong will reach police.
Her husband says that Trent had told him that he was dealing with a person down in Big Rapids with guns.
That guy was so mad. Trent was mad too because he drove out there, and it wasn't just for a gun. She had a tractor for sale, like a garden tractor, and they were selling it really cheap. And then I was like, okay, well, if it, runs fine, then we'll definitely buy it. And he got there and said that he didn't want to buy the tractor because, it wasn't in the shape that he thought it was in. He just started yelling at him and swearing at him. And
yelling at Trent?
Yeah, and Trent was like, well, I'll still buy the rifle or the shotgun from you, but, I don't want the tractor. And they just went off on it.
Okay. You know the names of these people?
I have no idea. I know they blocked us on Facebook, so we couldn't even see their phone.
People are selling guns, they use guns to trade and barter in rural areas. None of those guns were taken. They were just left there. I mean, if anything, you can get money from guns, but they were left behind.
They had TVs, they had trail cams, they had hunting equipment, they had a lot of guns, all things that would be particularly desirable for somebody who had a nefarious intent, okay? They had some money. They did have some cash on hand, that there'd been a big fundraiser in the area, and they'd gotten some cash. And they had drugs, okay? Not street drugs, they weren't like that, okay? But they had drugs that were marketable, maybe. Guns, money, and drugs, that's what drives the world, right?
That's a red flag. Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
If the motive is not to steal anything, what other reasons would someone have to want Trenton dead?
Is there a reason why anybody would want to take Trent out of the picture? And we really struggled to find too many people that really fit that bill. We did learn of that Amber did have an affair within the last few months prior to that.
After the transplant, she had started contacting a previous boyfriend and started, doing things that just were so out of character. It was like she needed to escape her own life, and it didn't turn out very well.
How well do you know Ryan Hunter?
Ryan Hunter? I used to work with him.
How well do you know?
He cheated on his wife with me. Mm-hmm. I work there.
Okay. And when was the last time you contacted him?
I talked to him 2011.
When was the last time you talked to him?
We talked on Facebook. Maybe it was 2012. I don't know. It was a couple of years ago.
Right. Well, it was 6 to 8 months ago.
Excuse me?
Correct. We have those.
6 to 8 months ago?
That's correct.
Law enforcement always has to make sure that anyone having an affair with the partner of someone who is murdered is also not an accomplice or guilty of that murder. In short, to eliminate the affair as a motive for the murder. In northern Michigan, detectives continue to focus on breaking and entering, with Trenton Mallory's hobby of buying and selling guns as a possible motive for his murder.
Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
One thing that interests detectives is that Amber has yet to ask how Trenton died.
Do you know how he died?
No, nobody.
Huh?
Nobody told me.
Are you curious? Alright, so there's several different ways that a homicide could occur, correct? Would you agree?
Yeah.
So he was shot. But it appears that he was sleeping when this occurred. Hey, look at this from the detective's point of view, okay? We're in broad daylight.
Yes.
A house in the middle of nowhere. Right? There's a truck parked in the driveway. Okay? The door's open. There's neighbors. Alright? And then all of a sudden a person is shot in his sleep at the house. Does that sound odd to you?
We interviewed Amber, and the details changed. There was just little things that would change over time because it's hard to keep track of all those inconsistencies, which, made her a prime suspect, but certainly didn't put us over the top where we could charge her at that point.
Another thing detectives are soon able to rule out is whether this is a burglary with narcotics being the primary goal. It's been observed that the kitchen cupboards and medicine cabinets have been gone through, and prescriptions and pill bottles scattered everywhere.
I see a lot of medication in there. Who's that for?
There's antibiotics in there. I had a bunch of dental work done. Marshall takes meds. We buy a lot of over-the-counter cold products and stuff when they're 88 cents at Walmart. Oh, it's just a bunch of random stuff.
Her son had a lot of medications, being a transplant person, and they thought maybe if he had narcotics or something, but these medicines were very dangerous for anybody who didn't need them. But they thought maybe it was for the medications because we do have a lot of drug problem here.
It's like a safe, like a fireproof safe, and that's open. Is that usually locked?
Well, it's locked, but the keys sit right on top of it. Like, we're not real safe about it.
Okay. What?
I mean, if we leave somewhere, we take the keys with us. Like, if we go, away for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Or if, someone comes over to babysit, we put the keys away. But usually the keys are just sitting there.
What could they possibly be looking for in there? They're opening up the safe, they're going through drawers. The person's going through a lot of different things.
I mean, we've got guns in there. Trent's hunting rifles and stuff, and he's got a couple guns that he would trade away.
So, if I was a bad guy and I wanted to walk in there and get something,
I mean, we keep money in the house. People know that we normally have cash on hand if we need something.
Okay. Who are these people that know that?
I don't know. I imagine if you said that somebody got into the safe because they took our money, which, whatever. But I don't know why anybody would hurt Trent, because if they needed the money that bad, he would just give it to them.
One of the big challenges detectives face is the discrepancy in statements between family members and friends. Often, people remember things differently for a number of reasons. Some of those reasons are innocent, others are not. In the case of Amber's statement, things are not adding up the way they should.
Sound like you guys had an amazing relationship.
Wow, it was. I mean, I've known Trent for a long time. We went on a blind date 10 years ago. And I chased that boy, and he just didn't want anything to do with me. And, we were the greatest friends. But then I decided to go off and get engaged to somebody else, and then all of a sudden he was interested in me. It was fine, and then Marshall came along, and, you know, he loves kids. Like, there's nothing in this world that Trent ever wanted more than to be a dad. Like, he just always wanted a house full of kids. We realized that we know each other better than most married couples know each other because we were best friends. And, you know, we tried to date, and then the stuff happened with Marshall, and, you know, it was just too much stress for me, like trying to deal with a dying child, and I was pregnant. But then after Carson was born, you know, we figured it out.
Investigators are having a hard time reconciling Amber's insistence that this is a burglary gone wrong with the facts of the case.
Amber tried to claim that this was a burglary. There were a few things that were disheveled. The victim was killed with a .22 rifle. Despite the fact that she claimed this was a burglary, forced entry into the home, there were numerous other guns in the house that were untouched, and the murder weapon was missing. As the investigation unfolds, it turns out that Amber and Trenton had been advertising this particular .22 rifle for sale. She actually had held it up with the serial number on one of the photographs, proudly advertising it for sale. It's the one gun that's missing from their home. At first she claimed she had no knowledge of that gun, she had never held that gun, and later looking at her social media, she's got the gun in her hand and she's advertising it for sale.
Even though under Michigan law, prosecutors do not need to prove a motive to get a conviction, investigators still want to know the why of the case. Usually, so does a jury when it involves murder.
What we found out in digging into their finances was their house was in foreclosure, one of their vehicles was being repossessed, they were severely behind on other loans as well, they had a mountain of credit card debt, and in addition to all of that, Amber was taking out payday Friday loans continuously at 300% interest just to get money. Why? Because she had a gambling addiction. She spent an exorbitant amount of money on gambling. Most, if not all, of these loans and this debt were taken out by her, and they were in Trenton's name. She tried to take out a loan in his name even after he was murdered.
As far as anybody knew, their relationship was still real good. But I saw, as Amber's mom, I knew what was out of characteristic for her. And when I heard her calling creditors saying Trent had changed his phone number and she would give him hers, all of a sudden my mailbox in Charlevoix, which is like 70 miles away, is filling up with their mail. She's just like, I don't want to burden Trenton with all the knowing about all these bills because he's so worried about them. She just got very manipulative. Amber had come to me at one point and told me that, you know, she was really in a financial bind. I took a loan out and I loaned Amber the money. Well, 6 months later is when all these bills started arriving in my mailbox. And I said, Amber, I took a loan out. I bailed you out of your financial trouble. What is all this? Well, she had over $25,000 in debt at the casino alone. And plus they had credit card debt. She had stopped paying the mortgage. The house was in foreclosure. The car had been repoed a few times. In fact, one time when it got repoed, she told Trenton that her and I got into an argument and she threatened to run me over with the car, so the police took her car. And he believed it. I had been watching Amber unravel for months. I mean, she was doing things like alienating the whole family against each other. When Amber gets into a situation, her first instinct is to just totally do away with it. I mean, there was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
As fingers continue to point to Amber, detectives do their best to try and get some answers from her that make sense.
I gotta tell you that there's a piece of information or piece of evidence that we have. It's in the lab right now. were there. I can't tell you. I mean, it could be anything from blood, fingerprints, shell casings. I can spend 22 shell if you have fingerprint. I spend 22 shell or DNA in a 22 shell. Okay, those type of things. All right, and we found the spent shell that was used. Okay, there's DNA. All right, is there any possible way that your DNA could be on that shell?
There's a lot of 22 shells discarded at my house. We were shooting a 22.
We know that that shell is the shell that was used to strike Trent, okay? What I'm asking you is a simple question, though, right? Is that 22 shell the one that we have, okay, that potentially has a fingerprint and DNA on that shell? Is that going to come back to you?
No.
You better be absolutely certain, because I'm telling you right now, what you're saying is not necessarily true.
I can't explain it for you.
Why is that?
I did not shoot Trent, so you asked me if my DNA would be on that spent shell casing, so I would say no.
In northern Michigan, Trenton Mallory has been murdered, and his fiancée, Amber, is under suspicion.
I mean, there was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
The one thing that was missing in the case was the murder weapon. We had a pretty good circumstantial case against her, but without that murder weapon, we didn't have the smoking gun, so to speak. And several months later, when the snow melted at her sister's house, her sister sees this 22 rifle buried in the snow. Did the right thing, called the police.
Detectives strike gold when they receive a call from Amy, Amber's sister, telling them she thinks the missing murder weapon is sticking out of a snowbank at her partner Mike's house. Quickly, detectives persuade Amy to allow them to record a conversation with Amber, asking her about the gun.
I need to talk to you. I went up to Mike's house, and when I was leaving there, I noticed something in the snowbank, and when I stopped
I put it there yesterday, and I was going to stop at Mike's house today and talk to him.
You put the gun in the yard?
I just bought it because I wanted something for home protection. What did you do with it?
I didn't touch it.
Oh, okay.
Are you kidding me? I didn't know it. I mean, it looks a lot like the gun that they had a picture of. They said there was a gun missing, and I was just shaking. I was freaked right out. If you could go right to Mike's and get it, because I just gotta get out of there.
All right, I'll be there with you.
Amber makes up this ridiculous story about having bought a gun for protection after Trenton was killed, and she was just basically storing it in the snowbank at her sister's house.
When Amber was little, she was as stubborn as they came. I mean, she was headstrong. And Amber, even as a little girl, could never accept defeat. And if Amber failed at something, she took it so hard that she would find ways to cover it up.
I totally misunderstood what he said to me. I was buying a gun from a person named Snow and asked them to meet me at Mike's house. Not that somebody stuck a gun in your snowbank.
I just don't get this stuff.
I don't either.
I love you, but I mean, you didn't do this, did you?
No, I didn't do it.
So the sister said, well, come out here and get rid of this thing. Come pick it up. And of course the police were there waiting for her.
I'm recording.
Amber does show up in her vehicle, which is recorded, and you can see she gets out of her car and she's kind of looking around, and she's physically starts to use her hands to dig in the snowbank looking for the rifle, but is unable to locate it.
She's coming back to her car.
was no longer there because the police had removed it. They confronted her about it, and of course, she did what sociopaths do. She lied and denied anything.
I talked to her right in the driveway and told her that, we had retrieved a gun from the snowbank and that she had just talked to Amy about the gun. So you don't have any idea? Because it appears to maybe be the same gun that we're looking for.
That's what she told me.
This is the point right now, Amber, that her story's starting to unravel.
Okay.
We've told enough things that are half-truths, untruths, and just flat-out lies at this point that they're all coming back to bite you.
You don't have an explanation this time. You putting a murder weapon inside your sister's snowbank?
I didn't.
You didn't? You didn't put that gun in that snowbank?
We've now collected the murder weapon that killed your fiancé out of your sister's driveway, okay? And where do you think that is right now?
I have no idea.
That's at the lab being processed for a lot of different things. She denied knowing anything about the gun being in the snowbank. So no matter what you confronted her with, she just denied.
When a gun is recovered, before it comes to the lab for an analysis, it's sent to another lab. It's sent to like a serological lab where they swab the gun for DNA and fingerprints. Now keep in mind, this gun was in a wet environment, was in snow. Your probability becomes lower to try to get any kind of physical evidence. Not impossible, you still can, but it's very difficult. I believe in this particular instance, they did remove some fingerprints off of it. They had her prints on file, and they compared them to Amber's prints, and they found out to be a match.
In a case like this, you want to have all that forensic evidence processed before you actually make arrests. So in this case, we chose not to because we were still waiting. Now that we had the rifle, they could do the test firing of the rifle. And in that process, they're going to compare the firing pin from that rifle to the firing pin from the casing that was retrieved out of the bedroom where Trent was killed, along with the actual spent projectile that was removed from Trent's head with the rifling of the rifle itself. Once you have those pieces of the puzzle, it becomes very clear that rifle retrieved from the snowbank is the same rifle that was posted by Amber and also was the one that killed Trent.
In her alibi, in her recitation of the events of that morning, Amber clearly detailed where she had been. And one of the places she said she stopped that morning was her sister's house. So her own statement connected her to where the gun was eventually located after the snow melt the following spring.
The ballistic analysis confirmed that the casing located in the bedroom next to Trent's body was matched to the rifle, the 10-22 Ruger rifle that was recovered from the snowbank. The projectile removed from Trent's head was also matched to the 10-22 Ruger removed from the snowbank. And when the gun was retrieved out of the snowbank, there was actually a live round in the chamber that was ejected, which was consistent with the same ammunition used to kill Trent.
Amber committing the crime was all about she couldn't admit that she had really messed up. They were losing their home and everything, and Trent had no idea. She had hid it from him so well.
I guess I can't get inside Amber's head for why she killed Trenton. After talking to her numerous times, she is a total narcissist. It's all about Amber. The truth's going to be that you shot your fiancé in bed while he was sleeping with a rifle that you put in your sister's driveway. It's going to make you look like this cold-blooded killer that thinks about nothing except herself.
When the gun was found in the snowbank and turned over to the forensic laboratory, the case basically turned into a slam dunk against Amber. At that point, it was frosting on the cake. There was indisputable evidence at that point that Amber was guilty.
Even Amber's perfect alibi, which she has so carefully constructed, would not stand up in court.
We got a guilty verdict. I would say within a half hour.
Amber Smith was convicted for first-degree murder and felony firearm. That conviction is an automatic life sentence without parole. She is getting sent to prison forever, and it's never going to be out in her lifetime.
I'm 100% sure she's guilty. I felt like I lost a son and a daughter.
Everybody said he was the nicest guy in the world. He was the best father, not only for his own son, but her son as well.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think she was capable of taking a life. Especially someone like Trenton who gave her the world.